Well, I try and like shove as much art in there as possible. I don't know if it's always art, but I think the clients that are attracted to the work that I can make allow me to do that. They're looking for something to make their brand stand out. And photography is a way that you use to convey your message, convey your philosophy.
Welcome to Get the Picture podcast. Our guest today is someone I've known since 1987. That's almost 40 years. And he's done a lot of cool things in his life, one of which is that he's done some amazing photography, specifically product photography. And so I want to really thank you for making the time to talk with me about that today. And welcome to Get the Picture podcast, John Pamer.
Hey there. So nice to be here. So nice to see your face.
Likewise. So why don't we just start with how you first got into photography? When we first met back in 1987, I knew you more as a drummer than a photographer, but maybe that's just my bad memory.
I was sort of in my high school, I was the sort of like key person with keys maybe to the dark room, but I spent some time in the dark room when I was in high school. And I think I was the person that printed out all the photos for the school newspaper. And I was kind of interested in printing presses and knowing the back end of production and stuff like that. And I don't remember always having a camera around with me. I think a lot of that was like, oh, film is expensive, blah, 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 blah. But I mean, I have pictures from back then, some at shows, some at skate parks or just friends, that kind of thing. And then when I graduated high school, I wasn't interested in going to college, and I got a job at Tower Records because that seemed like the ideal situation to me, and then quickly realized, oh, I should go to college. And so I went away to school in New York for one semester. And when that was kind of a silly experience. But I came back to DC, and my parents, I guess I went to a college counselor kind of person, like a little lost, not sure what I was doing. And I was interested in photography. So I took some classes at the Corcoran back then, maybe like 2 or 3 different classes over the course of a few semesters, just like auditing them, and took some like classes about international relations at American University. And then my parents were like, hey, you need to go to school, pick a school and go to it. And I ended up at UMass Amherst. And this was sort of the time when I was in this band called Tsunami, and we were touring quite a bit. So I would go for a semester and take a semester off. So my school experience was a little wackadoodle. One of the reasons I picked UMass Amherst is you could design your own major. And so I was interested in art and philosophy and music and graphic design and all of these kind of things. And I felt like, oh, there I could just take the classes I want. And if I write a thesis, I can make it work, which essentially I did. But I didn't love the photo program there. It was pretty dogmatic, Marxist, very like late 80s postmodern. And it seemed like there were rules that I was breaking all the time, and I was in trouble because I liked the way that images looked. So I was like, after I think 2 different photo classes there after a year, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to walk into this painting class and see what that's about. And fell in love with making paintings. And that was sort of the end of photo for me for a long, long time. And I made paintings for, I don't know, like 6 or 8 years, and moved to Brooklyn with the intention of trying to have shows and stuff like that. I was shy. And I think one of the key aspects of any kind of art career, definitely in photo as well, is your business savvy. And I just didn't have it. I ended up, like, I don't make paintings anymore. Well, occasionally I do, actually. It's kind of fun. But I ended up working as a graphic designer, and I became the associate art director at this magazine called American Photo Magazine, which I worked there for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years. And so I was around photography a lot. The images that it published were like it was like 10% super interesting and cool to me. And 30% not interesting, and the other whatever that is, 70% was or 60% was just like hot girls, so it was kind of a goofy place to be, but it worked for me at the time. And digital cameras started becoming available to me as like, hey, do you want to take this home essentially on a permanent loan? And so I would start taking cameras, and at the same time, camera companies back then would do these kind of like big freebie, like, let's go to Carmel, California and shoot the car race. And here's this, like lens this big that you get to carry around for the day and have access to the track. Those kind of things were happening. And so I was around photographers that were like kind of like National Geographic kind of photographers and journalist photographers for these kind of trips. And one was in the south of France. And I was like, no, wait, I love this. This is what I want to do. And I had been traveling to Midtown from Brooklyn for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, soul sucking commute every day, standing on the train for like 45 minutes. And my wife at the time was like, you should quit your job and become a photographer, which I never would have done if it wasn't for her, I also probably wouldn't have done it if I had known how hard it was going to be, because the struggle was real. It's still real, you know what I mean? But the struggle was deep. And, I think there's all different kinds of reasons for that. But yeah, started shooting again. I quit that job in like, I think 2009, and didn't really work at all until about 2011. And it's been sort of full time since then, with its various ups and downs. Sometimes it's to the edge of I can only work 70 hours a week and I haven't had a weekend off in like 2 months. And sometimes I'm just like sitting around twiddling my thumbs, stressing about when the next job's going to show up. So I don't know. It's a weird career, man.
I remember you first telling me about photography as a career as sort of feast or famine in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, it still is that way, like the beginning of this year. LA has treated me incredibly well as a photographer. I've always been busy in LA. And then I didn't really work in January at all. And I barely worked in February. And I was like, oh, is this the end? Like, am I just done? And then March, April, May were just like more work that I could basically handle. So I don't know.
Hmm.
It's strange.
So amidst all of that development, when did you get interested in product photography? And when did you realize that could be your career?
So my arc with that is when I first started shooting pictures, I wanted to be a portrait photographer. And I kept sending that portrait work to the New York Times Magazine, because at the time that seemed like the gold star stamp of approval. Like, you're actually a really good photographer if you work for the New York Times Magazine. I think it's still kind of like that, but at the time it was like the top of the mountain, at least for me personally. And I think for a lot of people as well. So I was sending them stuff all the time. All the time, I mean like every 2 months or something like that. And they were like, keep sending us work. We're looking for the right thing for you. And, I had friends who had opened a restaurant in Brooklyn, called Franny's, which was a beloved, sort of farm to table, first kind of really farm to table restaurant in Brooklyn, that changed Brooklyn food culture kind of. And they were making a cookbook and they asked me to shoot it. I had never shot food before that. And I was shooting that cookbook, and I emailed the New York Times Magazine and I was like, oh, by the way, I'm like shooting a lot of food now, and here's this cookbook that's in process. And they were like, great. Can you go to Per Se on Friday? Which is like, Per Se was like the best restaurant in the country. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm a food photographer, and I love food. I'm obsessed with food. And I love shooting food. And through food, that just opened a lot of doors. I've shot, I don't know, not a ton of cookbooks, but maybe like 8 or something like that. And I still shoot food related content often enough. I haven't shot a cookbook in a couple years, but I do love that process. In the meantime, my wife she started a new company that was a natural beauty company. And there was a period around that time, like maybe mid 2015, something like that, where it seemed like new brands were being started. New brands were getting their ball rolling through Instagram content. That was the way that lots of brands were kind of like coming up in the world and becoming noticed and seen. And she had a brand that needed a lot of content. And her ex-business partner at the time was a prop stylist. And so we worked together a lot and kind of developed this look because I didn't know what I was doing. And I was like, no, let's make it more fucked up. And sort of bringing that punk ethos to photography, just like, I don't know, let's try this, let's try this. And it became almost kind of a recognizable style of work it came to me out of a couple certain things that I combined, but I saw people afterwards doing were kind of similar to that. And at that time, Carrie Lynn's business, Cap Beauty, was also doing a cookbook. And I worked with a food stylist that was like, she had been Victoria Granoff. She had been Irving Penn's food stylist at the end of his life, had been on a ton. She'd been a working food stylist for, I don't know, at that point, like 30 years, 20 years, something like that. And so it was very, very professional. And I learned a ton from her just by watching her and being around somebody that was a professional. And she introduced me to her agent at the time. And the agent was like, food doesn't pay, beauty pays. Let's make you a beauty photographer, like a, product photographer. So I kind of leaned into that at that time.
Well, you started talking about your style, and from looking at your product photography, like on Instagram, on your website, I would agree. I would definitely say you have a recognizable style that stands out. A lot of the images that struck me were use of like water in motion, moving water or liquid, smoke or haze, sometimes some motion blur, and very striking bold colors and use of sharp shadow and light. Not that nobody else does those things, but those things kind of stood out for me. Can you talk about your style and how
Yeah,
you would
I
describe it,
think,
how it developed?
I would say mostly it's from just leaning into like, how much art can I shove into this commercial endeavor? Like I made paintings for a long time. I was an art director for a long time. And I think both those things kind of inform the way that I see imagery,
Mm-hmm.
and just keep trying to push it and amplify whatever aspect is kind of turning me on in that photo, whether that be bold colors or strong shadows. Yeah, just kind of leaning into it. How do we make this better? It takes a lot of photos for me to make, like, I don't show a lot of the work that I make because, well, one, I'm like pretty bad at that kind of promotion, but the other is like, it's hard to get a good image. You know what I mean? Like I could shoot an entire day's worth of work and not feel really like super stoked about any of the imagery. And then sometimes you're just like, boom, 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 everything's looking really good. So I don't know. There's some strange magic in there that I don't understand.
So like we're in the age now of, you go on Amazon and you see a product listing, and you have product photography that's like the blank white background with the item just sort of hovering in space around it, or like DoorDash listings where you just have a plate of food, whatever, and people using their phones to take pictures of a bike they want to sell on Facebook Marketplace or something. Like that's what a lot of people think when they think of product photography, I think. But so obviously what you do is not that. Yeah, what would you
Sometimes
say
I
is
do that.
some, yeah, if it
Yeah.
pays, hey?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's true, more and more people do need product photography now for if people have an Etsy shop or
I
a
think we might
restaurant
be at
owner.
the end of that, like with AI, but I'm not 100% sure how that will play out. It's hard
I
to
was going
know.
to ask about that too, yeah, because and I've done a little bit of food photography and a little bit of product photography, mostly just playing around for myself. And yeah, certainly with what you can do now, erase background or change this, change that with AI, it does make what you can do sort of on your own. You can do a lot more, but how is what you do different than that? Like what if you look at your photos, I think it's clearly it's art, like you said, it's not just a snapshot.
Well, I try and like shove as much art in there as possible. I don't know if it's always art, but I think the clients that are attracted to the work that I kind of make allow me to do that. They're looking for something to make their brand stand out. There's a million young brands, right? And photography is a way that you use to convey your message, convey your sort of like a philosophy. And so it is very collaborative. And sometimes I'm just doing exactly what someone asked me to do. And sometimes I'm like, well, let's try this. Let's do this. So it is collaborative. And I would say when I'm getting the images that I love the most, there is a sense of play and a sense of going for it, like a sense of creativity. And that's what really turns me on. Seeing something that I didn't know was going to happen and being excited about it is just like really just a feeling that's to me is like when I see, like I get really excited when I see something on screen that we just took that I wasn't expecting. And it's just like, boom, yes, yes, we did it. And it's like winning like a game or something like that. It's still exciting and it keeps me going.
Yeah, when you say that, that makes me think of the times that I've tried with like a bottle and having like water or liquid splashing like into a glass or into a bottle, and you get some of the splashing water droplets and stuff, and some of it is you can't plan how it's going to look. You can sort of plan, but then you can end up getting a shot that's like totally different than what you expected. There is actually that element of trial and error and just surprise in what you can create. So one question I had was in a lot of photography, a lot of advice that you see online for people trying to get into photography is that it's really important to niche down into a specific niche. Like, yeah, product photography, but actually niche down more than that, be just a jewelry photographer, just a cosmetic or just, beverages or something like that. How important do you think that is to have a particular niche, or is that not important these days?
I think it depends on where you are in your career. If you're super young and you're exploring, I think you should explore as many avenues as possible. If you are slightly more established, then from a business perspective, that makes a lot of sense. It's very difficult to shoot jewelry and or food or products, and it takes a lot of time and energy to figure out how to do it well. I'm still learning how to shoot products, and I've been doing it for, I don't know, 12 years or something like that, 15 years maybe. I think depending on who is hiring you, it's easier to go to a jewelry company with a bunch of jewelry work than it is to go to them with some food photography and be like, hey, I want to shoot some jewelry too. Like people, everyone's super busy and overwhelmed by this crazy world we live in. And I think making decisions fast is, if you can help someone hiring you make a decision faster or make their job easier, that is a bonus for both of you.
So you mentioned before that you're not necessarily always the best at self-promotion or promoting your work. Like, how do you find clients, or have you just been doing it long enough that clients come to you?
Yeah, they kind of come to me. Like I'll reach out when I meet people that are art directors. I'm definitely like, hey, I'm a photographer. Have a look. If you want to work on something, that would be amazing. And those kind of personal connections usually are how work happens for me. I don't think I mean, maybe I've gotten jobs just based on what I'm putting online, but I don't think that that's true. I think it's normally some sort of recommendation, word of mouth kind of thing. I am not proactive about my career, but the people that I know that are the winners in the game. It just sort of depends on your personality. And somehow I've found this zone where I'm not a relentless self promoter, but I get enough work coming in the door that it seems viable. I am in the process of getting a divorce, so my life has changed, and I'm like, "Oh, yes, I need to be a relentless promoter to see what happens," Like, let's work this, and, a couple things have come recently to me because I've kind of been working it a bit more. But networking, I would say, and, meeting and helping people as much as you can.
Yeah, I think that's a common thread that I hear from almost everyone I talk to, and for myself. That mo- when I first decided I was going to try and do photography as a money making adventure and not just as a hobby, I was like, okay, I'll put up a website, and then everyone will bang down my doors to come hire me, and that did not happen. That's not how it works. It's really is those personal connections, starting with people and then spreading from there. That, at least for me, that was my experience, and it seems like probably some of what you've experienced as well.
Yeah, 100%.
So saying that, do you think product photography is a viable career to start in 2026? Like, what kind of product work is most in demand, and how is AI and new technology changing the industry?
I think AI is gonna change low-end photography. I don't know if low-end product photography will exist, like, silos for brands that are just, on a white background kind of product photography. I don't really know what the future of that entails. Is Photoshop. Like, I have a brand that I worked for quite a bit, and recently we reshot their entire website. They have a huge range of products, and they are starting to take the bottles and sort of the core of what I've shot and just changing the type and the labels on top of that, adding all of that stuff in post, which I think is, from a business move, is smart. That's probably what I would do if that was my business. Think the one of the things that might play out is figuring out how to differentiate yourself with product photography in an age of AI. And I don't know what exactly that means, but having a more human touch probably is like an attribute that is uh something that people could lean into with their product photography. And I think, like for silos on white, that doesn't mean anything. But if it's like has a hand in it, or it's a little bit weird, I think those kind of images hopefully might be something that people appreciate more from a business point of view. Whereas if you're looking at an AI image and you're thinking that maybe it's fake, then you kind of are looking at it askew and being like, I don't know if I really trust this brand.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly people who will avoid anything that is associated with AI if they know that it is. So that, I don't know if that. I guess it depends on what your product or what your business is as to how much that'll impact you.
Yeah, it's so hard to know right now. I think we're in such an era of like AI is a giant blob being thrown against the wall, and we'll see what sticks and how it changes our world. It's not something that I think about a lot, but I do think that when I talk to clients about differentiating newer clients that are kind of like trying to figure out their brand, I talk to them about like, oh, how do you make this feel more human? How do you add more emotion to what you're doing, right? Because the brands that you love, you have a human connection to, right? Like, you think about Nike, you can fucking cry during a Nike commercial. You know what I mean? Like they are very, very good at that. But it is, at the end of the day, just a sneaker company. Essentially, it's just a brand, but they Apple, same thing. You know what I mean? How do you take something that is just an object and give you an emotional connection?
Right. People feel just devoted to that brand. Yeah. So for beginner photographers or somebody trying to develop product photography work, how what are some suggestions you might have for building a portfolio if you don't have clients yet? Like, and I just as an anecdote, I remember I saw one guy put on Instagram, like he just started grabbing stuff around his house, a bottle of toothpaste that he has or a candy bar, and just created some like really creative product photography. He wasn't hired by those companies. He just did it for fun and put it online, tagged the company. And he started getting actually some bites, from companies who are like, ooh, that's interesting. Yeah, do a shoot for us. Is that a way that people could do it? Or what are some ways people can try and build a
Yeah,
portfolio?
100%. I think the way is just to be working as diligently as possible and making as much work as you possibly can when you're really young and seeing what sticks, try shooting the same thing 50 different ways. Not 50, probably I would never do that. But like 5 or 10 different ways is something like that. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
what happens when you push it farther? What happens when the light is off? What happens when, like you shoot it on a sidewalk? What happens when you in full sunlight? What happens when you shoot it by moonlight? Like I think driving towards understanding what you're doing and not stopping when you're young is the way to go. Just go for it. Go hard. You're young. Go hard, man.
Or even if you're not young, if you're just getting started and you're in your midlife crisis, go hard then too.
Yeah, go hard then too.
So I do want to just in introducing this next question, reemphasize something you said that I think is really important, probably for thinking about product photography or really any kind of photography, especially in this age of growing AI, is that you really need to. The first thing you need to do is to think about what you're going to be shooting creatively and artistically, and that is the number one thing you can bring that AI or computers can't bring, is coming up with a new way to see things and implementing that. Once it's out there, of course, AI can replicate it. So that said, that's the most important thing. I want to get into a little bit of maybe technique and equipment and stuff like that. That sort of bare bones what you use to create the product photography you do. So let's just start with like camera and lenses. What do you use most when you're doing uh, product
For the most
photography?
part, I only shoot with my main body and my main lens. I'm not a big gearhead, honestly. If a shoot demands, like I'm shooting more motion these days, and so that's like a fully different conversation. But have a Canon 5D SR is my main body. Digital photography is weird. That body was like $4,200 when I bought it. And I think the last time I looked, I don't even think they make it anymore, but I think it was like $1,600 new or something like that. My main lens that I use is a Zeiss 50 macro. It's really I have like a pancake lens, I think it's a 42 millimeter or 38 millimeter. I can't remember. I think it's 42, that I use for some sort of personal projects and when I'm like out and about, but it's like, it was like literally $90 when I bought it or something like that. It's probably like 150 now or something like that. So I'm not big gearhead. That's the stuff that works for me. The same thing goes for my lights. Like I love the lights that I have, but they're very old and very finicky and they're called Dynalights. I have 2 Dynalite power packs and I don't know, 5 or 6 different strobe heads. I never very, very frequently will I use that much light on a shoot, but
Is that
a f-
continuous or strobe lighting?
no, that's strobe. Um, a friend of mine gave me those when he upgraded to his pro photo thing, and I just was like, I love the way that it looks. It looks better than pro photo to me, but it's old finicky gear. Then I think the guy that fixes it in New Jersey is like barely hanging on to you know to life. So I'm not sure. I'm sure there's somebody here in LA that will fix that stuff for me when it breaks, but it's just kind of, you could buy an entire set of Dynalights on eBay for $300 or $400, whereas a brand new pro photo stuff, you're going to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on it. And I guess pro photo is kind of the standard when you go to larger studios now, but I just never like the quality of the light, and I prefer my Dynalights.
Yeah, there's also now you can go on B&H Photo or Amazon or wherever and get Godox lights or newer, however you say it, super cheap. And when you're just starting out, that stuff's great. And even I still use Godox as my main strobe. So like, when I'm using flash, like, um, there's nothing wrong with it. You may not get the consistent, like if you're doing portraits and you're shooting like 100 quick shot, it may not get every shot the way a pro photo one would, but anything other than that,
Yeah,
you can do great
I
work
think,
with anything.
yeah, for sure. You can make awesome work on your iPhone. It's a great camera. I mean, that's $1,000 or whatever, how much an iPhone costs now. But like you can buy a digital point and shoot from 5 years ago that's cheap, and it's going to be great.
So your Canon is full frame, I assume, and it, and then you said 50 millimeter lens. That's interesting. I assumed you probably didn't use anything too wide for product, but because you might start getting distortion if you go too wide. But I guess I would have guessed that maybe you use something a little, a little longer. But they do say 50
It's
millimeters the closest to what your eye sees. So.
Yeah, that's kind of why I like it. Like the Zeiss, actually, the lens that I have is at Zeiss right now. It's being repaired. So I'm kind of playing around with other lenses. They stopped making that lens, which I didn't realize. I was gonna go buy a new one, and I was like, oh, I guess I need to have this repaired. So I've been playing around with some other lenses, and that's just the lens that I trust. That's the one that I've shot with forever. Like I've had that lens for, I don't know, 10 years. I think when I first started shooting, there was a food photographer, something like that. He's a British food photographer who, like a friend of mine had worked with. And I was like very curious about all of that kind of gear and stuff like that. And she said that he showed up with just the camera, just one lens, and some tiny little bounce cards. And she was like, "This is all you carry?" And he's like, "Yeah, like I don't want to waste my money on all the other stuff. This works." Like I don't hand hold when I shoot anything, barely at all. But he was hand holding, shooting food. And you can move really, really fast when you're doing that. So I think I learned something about that in terms of just, I don't need a ton of lenses. You know what I mean? Like there are projects that like I really want a long lens for a certain project that I want to shoot in LA right now that I'm thinking about, but that's unrelated to product photography. It's more like I kind of have an art part of what I do as well. But I don't know if I would buy that lens. Like, do I need a 200 or 300 millimeter lens that's going to cost me $4,000 or $5,000 in my kit if I'm never using it? I can just rent it for, here in LA, 60 or $80 a day, and just go out when I feel like doing that, or renting it for a week and going out every day and finishing the project.
That's definitely, I think, good advice especially if you're thinking about putting down the money for lenses that are 1,000 and up a lot from there. Rent it first, try it out. If you just need it for one particular job and you may not need it again, renting is a great way to go.
Yeah, I would say that there's a similar thing for me with music that's called it's called GAS, gear acquisition syndrome.
Uh-huh.
And in music, I'm like, oh, once I buy this pedal or once I buy this synthesizer, it's all going to be figured out. And it just sits in a closet. You know what I mean? Like for the most part, it's just sitting in a closet. So I guess that's my take on photography.
Yeah, I don't consider myself being really severe with gear acquisition syndrome, but sort of acquire stuff over time. And since having recently moved, I sold a whole bunch of stuff to KEH, and it was nice to get some money back for all of it. But I hadn't realized how much crap I had just acquired through, like, oh, let me try a 28 millimeter lens, let me try a 135 and then suddenly you have all the stuff that you don't use. Sell it. So let's talk about with product photography, depth of field. A lot of times when people who focus mainly on portraits or things like that, you want like a, 1.8, 1.4, you want to get as wide open as possible and get really shallow depth of field to get that bokeh in the background to, get that fall off. And that's not what you do, I assume, most of the time with product photography. Can you talk about depth of field a little bit with product photography?
Yeah, with my lens, I think it is like I'm not a super gearhead, but I think they say that most lenses are stop down 2 or 3 is its sharpest.
Yeah.
I that is sort of in the center. Corner to corner sharpness for me, I think is like f8, f11, somewhere in there. And I think most of the stuff that I shoot at is f11. Rarely do I stop down to a lot of blurred background. There was a moment when I was shooting, there was a magazine called Kinfolk, and they were very, very stopped down. And it was a very, very specific look. And I remember a friend of mine starting to shoot and asking about that. And I was like, well, the thing is like by the time you figure out how to make images this good, stop down this way, it's not going to be this fashion. It's going to be out of fashion.
Mhm.
So I could imagine that coming back into play, like really stop down product photography. Like that's an interesting idea in terms of AI, because I don't know with AI what I'm seeing with blur or sort of out of focus parts of that imagery. That might Maybe that's an area of investigation. But yeah, for the most part, I'm shooting like f11. It's making my job is to help people sell their products, essentially, and that is making the product look the very best that it possibly can. The most ideal, getting as close to the ideal version of that product as possible. And I think a lot of that is sharpness. Like you want to see the whole thing.
Yeah, and so if you're shooting at f11 and presumably you're in a studio kind of situation and you have lighting that you're bringing, but if you're shooting at f11, like you talked before about someone shooting handheld, I'm already thinking like, geez, how can you shoot handheld at f11? If you're,
Well, with a lot of
so
light, you can,
I
you know.
suppose, yeah, yeah,
So like, the lights are popping, uh you can do that. I think actually when I was talking about that photographer, a lot of that was natural light. A lot of people shoot food only natural light, and I've done both. And I think natural light usually looks better, but from a business perspective, you don't get natural light all day long, right?
right,
Like sometimes you're chasing the light in your studio. Like my studio has a big overhead. It's kind of diffused, but I've been in studios before where there's like, like a west facing windows. You're only getting real direct sunlight a couple hours a day. That's not like a viable, like I can't be like, okay, we got to get these 15 shots in this like hour long window that there's direct light here. That's like stressful. So I guess that's the reason to use strobes.
yeah. So how much do you do like to try to get the image that you want straight out of camera, and how much work do you do afterwards in post, like in Photoshop? And together with that, do you do like to get an image sharp all the way through? One way some people do that is with like focus stacking or composite images. Do you do any of that kind of stuff, or do you mostly try and get it straight
Yeah,
out of camera?
I focus stack sometimes. It really depends on how far back I am, like if I'm super close and I have two products and one is here and one is here and we want them both in focus, you have to focus stack.
You have to, yeah,
But if I'm like, shooting the camera lens, and they're like that close together, you can kind of fudge the difference a little bit if you go a little bit behind the forward product and you get enough depth of focus. So it really is a kind of case by case. Like the more that shoot, the more I feel like I want the image to be in camera. Like I used to play a lot more with Photoshop, and I had a full body of work that I was kind of known for that was very, like I was pushing things in Photoshop pretty hard. And I don't really do that anymore. I think one of the reasons is the less I sit at a computer, the more I like my life. Like, like I'm on my phone way too much, like I try and keep my phone usage to like 2.5 hours a day, but like I'm also into sports, and right now is an incredible time. There's so many sporting events going on that I'm like the other day I was like, I was on my phone for 7 hours. That is psychotic. I need to throw this thing in the river.
The struggle is
And
real.
yeah, it's a crack pipe, man. So I think that is maybe a reason that I'm not as in love with Photoshop as I once was. I'm also more confident, I think, in what I'm shooting and knowing what I have when I get it than I used to be. Like there's a certain sense when I'm shooting that it either works or it doesn't. And I think if it wasn't working 10, 12 years ago, I would have been like, well, let me see what I can do with this in post. And I am less like that than I used to be. But, like I also make music on the computer. So like I spend a lot of time on my computer. So I think it's just trying to keep that at a minimum.
Yeah. That's it's hard, but I think that makes sense. And I also, as you were talking, I was thinking about how when I first started with photography more seriously, I was spending a lot more time editing than I am now. Like I do some pretty basic edits on most of the work I do, but unless it's something like where I was shooting at a concert with super low light and I'm having to do a lot of work to bring out the image, like I do some very basic edits and I put stuff out.
Yeah. That said, I spend a lot of time. Um, I don't always retouch my work, but if I'm available to do it, I'll take the money. Depending on time frame and what else is going on in my life and when the clients need the imagery. But I spend a lot of time looking at dust and specs
That's
and
what I was going to
like
ask about next. You've anticipated.
this box was shipped and the corner is dented, and my job is to make everything idealized, sort of. And so like you don't want a box with a dented corner when you're selling products, it makes you look bad. So I spend a decent amount of time doing that kind of work rather than changing things in the image that aren't there, in terms of like, oh, let's add in a different background, or let's throw, like comping a lot of kind of things. I don't do that much for what I do.
So yeah, let's go there. Let's talk about some of the particularities with product photography. And again, my experience is extremely limited. During COVID, when I was spending a lot more time at home, I decided to play around with product photography with stuff around the house, and uh, immediately discovered that every speck of dust, every fingerprint shows up immediately. Like what's the kind of work that you have to do it almost seems like you have to be like a surgeon preparing for surgery, getting everything super clean. So that's one
Yeah.
thing. And then, yeah, let's do that first.
I work with stylists quite a bit. So my job is not to move things on set. Like on larger sets where there are 6 to 10 people, there is a stylist and there's an assistant stylist. And the assistant stylist job is really to like carry and clean stuff. You know what I mean? It's kind of, and their job is so important. I can't tell you the amount of hours in my life I've spent taking fingerprints off of glass, and it's just a complete waste of time and energy, and it's so dumb, but it's a very important part of the job, getting things clean. I recently started using these lint free, like almost like science paper towels. They're called Kimtech or Kintech. I can't remember what they're called, but I had a sort of a Digitech, which is another important person on these kind of larger jobs. that had them in his kit, and we were having trouble getting dust off of something. And he was like, "Oh, I got some Kintec or Kimtech," and I was like, "What's that?" So the next time I went to the photo supply, I was like, "Okay, I need 2 boxes of these $20 paper towels." So yeah, that when I am on a set that is just me and maybe a client, sometimes it's just me. I zoom in on everything I'm shooting and I'm looking at how clean it is. And I use a little blower. I have different sort of like microfiber rags. I have those paper towels that I was just talking about. It needs to be clean, or like cleaning it on set is going to take you 30 seconds, and cleaning it in post is going to take you like 30 minutes or an hour. I've cleaned images for half a day before, like it's just, that's not really how I want to spend my time.
There's a limited number of hours in a life, and is that how you want to spend them?
It is not. And the older I get, the more I understand that,
Right, right.
like as it seems like the amount of time is dwindling, you know, I need to be adamant about how I want to spend that time.
For real. So one of the things that I tried when I was doing product photography that I immediately discovered how complex it was, at least for a beginner, was with like a liquor bottle. And then when you have flash, the flash hits the bottle. Like if you have flash coming from two sides or wherever you angle them, it produces these like wild, like crazy looking glare and reflection stuff all over the bottle. And it looks terrible, and it's like, how the heck do you do that? Because you need the light. Can you walk through a little bit? And then I can tell you maybe tips I've
Yeah.
used, but how do
And
you do
I
that?
would say that I am not a super, super technical photographer. Like I don't have a ton of modifiers in my studio. I usually don't shoot through softboxes. I can and do shoot through like a filter. Like I can kind of build my own softboxes a little bit on set. But if you want a very professional looking bottle shot, you need some modifiers for how you're shooting it. You want some strip lights. You maybe want to bounce the strip light into a flat surface, so you're skimming. The light comes around and skims the bottle just
The side
perfectly.
bottle, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very technical, and honestly, I had an agent that was like, you should be spending more time learning the technical aspects of your work. And as a former recovering DIY indie rocker, I was like, that was my reaction. And I still am not there, but I understand it a lot more than I used to. So I have a brand new studio that's very nice that I think I will be in for a long time. And if I start investing in things like hand making strip lights, like I kind of love old school people that made their own softboxes. I think that's super, super cool. So that's kind of in the back of my mind, like, oh, now I actually have a place to like hang these different kind of soft boxes. But those kind of modifiers, like I'm cheap, and I don't want to spend, $4,000 on a bunch of different soft boxes that I probably won't use that often.
And yeah, if you can just design something that is what you need for the work you're doing, why not just do that? MacGyvering things is always better. I mean, especially if you're able to do it and you can do it a lot more cheaply. A
Yeah,
lot of photography stuff's expensive.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's it. I on larger shoots, I'll have somebody whose job is like dealing with lights and that kind of stuff. And I will say, oh, I want that a little bit softer. Oh, can we get a harder edge right here? And it's their job to figure it out, on the sort of like jobs with lower or sort of like newer clients. They appreciate the aspect of what I do is more arty, it's a funny balance. But I have only had a couple clients be, no, we need this particular kind of light. And I didn't know how to do it. and it stressed me out beyond belief. And one of those clients I don't really work for anymore. So, because I didn't know that aspect of my job. So,
Yeah, I remember with trying to do going back to the bottle question and avoiding all the crazy glare and shadows or glare and reflections. Like I ended up doing something where I think the lights were like behind the bottle and then like having sort of like a black diffuser, different. I don't know. Like I had to do a lot of crazy things to get the light I wanted so that the label was visible and so that you could have a sort of mood that you wanted, but without getting the crazy glares and shadows. But it is very technical and it takes a lot of trial and error to get it just right, or at least when it did for me, not knowing what I was doing.
yeah. And if you think about like sort of, I guess for when I think about bottle pictures, I immediately think about beer ads. That's just what kind of comes to mind. Those images that you're seeing for like, I don't know, Stella Artois or Michelob Ultra or whatever, those are heavily processed, perfected, and heavily comped images. The label is shot with different lights than the bottle. The different parts of the bottle are shot with different lights, and you're moving lights as you shoot, and you're making plates of each perfect part of the image, and you're putting them all together in post.
Yeah, and I sort
At
of
least
realized that. Yeah,
Oh, I was just going to
that's
say, at least post Photoshop, that's how it works. It didn't used to work that way, but it didn't. It also used to be like you would spend 3 days lighting a bottle and shooting it. And now you're shooting 10 or 12 bottles in one day. So, like the post work kind of changed photography for things like
yeah.
that, is my understanding of how it works.
I can't imagine doing product photography back in like before digital photography. Just the that level of technical expertise was just absolutely necessary to be able to do it. Um, and must
Yeah.
have been
And
things would have
budgets
taken
aren't
a lot
like that
longer.
anymore. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? There's no budget to shoot a single bottle that is like a 3 or 4 day long shoot. At least at my level, I don't see that. I think that does happen, but I think clients, because of social media and the internet, you just need a lot of work. Whereas back then, you could have that image be your main image for years, probably. Like you probably saw the same Budweiser image at the supermarket for years. And I don't think it's like that anymore. I think that stuff is our attention span does requires a refresher, so we're not bored, and so we drink more Budweiser.
And on the one hand, hey, that creates more product photography work, I suppose. But on the other hand, it's it is not in terms of what you could get paid to do that 3-day long shoot back then versus the amount of work you have to do now to make a living.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have sort of one kind of mentor person. Like I've never really had that in my life, sadly. And he is somebody that was a Vogue contract photographer all throughout the 80s, is very complimentary in a way that makes me feel very good about my work. Like I think he's freaking genius. And he was like, look, I own a floor in Soho of a whole building on Broadway. I have a, a house in Switzerland. I have an amazing apartment in the city. And he's like, you showed up late. He's like, if you had showed up in 1980, you would have been my competition. And he's like, and now if as a product photographer, you ever get to own your own house, it'll kind of be a miracle, you know? But he's like, I was paid $1 million by Condé Nast every year for decades to shoot very little, and that's just as the world changed because of the internet. And I don't know, billionaires maybe getting greedier. I'm not really 100% sure, but like that's not available to me in a way that it was available to him.
So it is possible to make a living doing for product photography in 2026, but you're not probably going to be making seven figures a year unless you're one of the very, very, very few.
I think there are people that are doing that, but I think that is a very, very that's the top of the top, you know? Like, I don't even know how to guess, you know? Like, maybe it's 1%, maybe it's 0.05% of all working photographers. I really don't know. Like, I don't pay
Yeah.
that much attention to that. But, of the photographers that I know that have made $1 million in a year, there's not that many, you know? Couple, couple. Yeah.
So as we start wrapping up, what would be some advice that you would have for someone wanting to get into product photography?
I think kind of what I said earlier is just go work really hard, try a bazillion different things, find your lane by relentlessly looking for it. Find out what turns you on and lean into that. Yeah, I think that's it.
Sounds great. Can you talk about like what are maybe one or two of your favorite product photos that you've done throughout your career and maybe describe them a little bit and what maybe would be some of your favorite all-time product photos that aren't yours?
For I love in terms of work, I love sort of Bauhaus era photography. I think that still, despite the fact that some of it's almost 100 years old, it still looks so fresh to me, which is really blows my mind. Um, and it's not necessarily product photography, but it is object photography, still life photography. Bauhaus still life photography is super, super interesting to me. I also love people like Steichen, who was a Condé Nast photographer for a long, long time and shot a lot of different kinds of things. And I really appreciate that consistency of beauty across all the different kind of imagery that he made. I recently came across a book. There was a big book fair here in LA at Art Center like last month, and I went. And there is a photographer named Mike Mandel who made a bunch of stuff with a photographer named Larry Sultan and like super conceptual 70s work. Larry Sultan became more of a photographer. And Mike Mandel, I don't really know that much about, but he just put this book out that was photos by Ansel Adams that really no one knows his archive. And, you know, like I only think of that moonrise picture or like the back of that church in New Mexico when I think of Ansel Adams. But this was like stuff that he was making for annual reports and that kind of stuff. And it's fascinating how good it is. And to see somebody whose work, like, I don't ever really think about Ansel Adams, but to think like, oh, I know what his work is about. And then to see like how much he put into making photos of all different kind of things through his career was incredible to me. So I guess the things that turn me on are commercial photographer. The things that speak to me in my career are commercial photographers that kind of have an art practice or a wide sort of scope to what they do. And that was the second part of your question, and I don't remember what the first part. Oh, the pictures of things
Of
that I've
yours.
taken pictures of that are meaningful to me. I don't know if there's anything like specifically, but I think over my career, I think that Franny's cookbook that I mentioned was so important to me and my career in photography. So I love those images, even though I would never make pictures that look like that anymore. There was a cookbook, two cookbooks after that. One was for a company called Moon Juice, and there was a ton of creative freedom in that. And then for my ex's company, Cap Beauty, we did a book that was really, really meant a lot to me. But I don't know if I have a signature image, honestly. And they change. Like I remember during the World Cup when France was playing Italy, I was shooting for the New York Times had a soccer blog. That was like literally the beginning of soccer blogs or blogs. The New York Times didn't have blogs back then. And my friend Rob was like, no, we need to do a blog about this. Like, as the Times needs to be doing news this way. So I went and, God, I can't even remember, but I think France won at the last second. And I was in a big bar, like kind of up above shooting, and I shot mostly film back then, which I didn't really think about for this job, but there was an image that where the bar went, people lost their goddamn minds. The bartender was spraying his spray gun in the air and people were like falling over each other. It was like a wide scene of pandemonium and joy. And for the longest time, that was my signature image, and it's not even on my website anymore. So hopefully whatever image that I'm loving right now in 10 years won't even be on my site, because I'll be so stoked about the work I'm making in 5 or 10 years.
Hell yeah. Well, why don't we wrap it up there, and just why don't you end up with where our listeners or viewers can see your work and learn more about what you do?
Sure. So my website, I have a fake photo name. My photo name is John Von Pamer. That is kind of an insider joke with some people that I used to work with, but that became my photo name. So it's JOHN, V is in Victor, ON, P is in Papa, AM is in Macho, ER.com. And then I have I have a couple Instagram accounts that are sadly less updated than they should be, but have different work on them. And yeah.
Thanks again so much for taking the time to talk about the work you've been doing over the last decades and some advice for potential incipient product photographers. I think there's a lot there that people can listen to and hopefully learn from. I know I've learned some things, and appreciate your time. And for anyone who is listening or watching, if you're watching, you saw a couple cameos from one of my cats, so say hi to Loki. And if you're listening and still watching this far, please press all the buttons, the like, the subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this. And if you can spare a few bucks a month to support this work on Patreon, it helps me keep the podcast going. So thanks again, John. Appreciate your time and your work.
It was good to see you, dude.